I'm Michael Moreci.
And I'm Keir Graff.
Welcome to the Filmographers Podcast, the show where we study a director's entire career, one movie at a time. And today we're discussing Billy Wilder's fifth American picture, A Foreign Affair. Keir, I was absolutely fascinated by this movie, and I feel like, and this may sound strange, but stay with me, I feel like A Foreign Affair is the first Wilder movie that's up to the task of being as fascinating and complex as the man himself. Now, I'm not saying it's better than the movies he's made so far, but, movies, there's a couple small ones that we've covered. Double Indemnity is one. The Academy Award-winning Lost Weekend is another. So I'm not saying it's better than those, but I am saying that it's the first movie where we see Wilder, the Wilder that we know, coming through in a major way.
When you first said that to me, I have to admit, I resisted the idea. I'm coming around to it, but I think there's a lot to unpack.
Well, good news. That's exactly what we're going to do in this episode today. While Foreign Affair is considered one of Wilder's minor works, unfairly, I'd say, we have a lot to discuss, including why the movie was banned by the U.S. military, Wilder's feud with star Jean Arthur, and how this movie marked the beginning of the end of Wilder's relationship with his long-standing writing partner, Charles Brackett. But before we do any of that, Keir, give me your one-sentence summary of Billy Wilder's 1948 film, A Foreign Affair.
In post-war Berlin, a congresswoman investigating so-called moral malaria among the troops is seduced by an army captain who's trying to hide his affair with a German cabaret singer, but the captain is the real dupe because he's being used as bait to lure a Nazi war criminal out of the shadows.
I constantly make what I want to say, not logical, but cynical pictures. Mm-hmm. My pictures were cynical, that were bitter, and when I do a cynical one, they say, well, when are you going to do a funny one again? When I do a funny one, they say, what about the wonderful cynical things you did, Double Indemnity or Sunset Boulevard or Ace in the Hole, I don't know what you call it here in Belgium. That's another comedy. So I'm bound to disappoint somebody.
Mm-hmm. You're balancing all the time.
Well, I try to make the story which at a particular time interests me the most.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of story do you prefer? Cynical or funny?
A good one. One that will be most successful, that will get the good reviews and get a lot of people to come in to see the picture.
And how do you see that in advance?
Well, you don't, to tell you the truth. Mm-hmm. We are in the picture business, or shall I say, in the show business, whether it is a movie or a stage play. Mm-hmm. We are all entering dark rooms, trying to find our way. Some of us see a little bit better. Mm-hmm. Some of us see less good, but we are all bound to fall over a piece of furniture and break our leg or our neck. Mm-hmm.
So it is some sort of an inspiration choosing a picture.
It is sort of if you're an honest workman, and I don't use the word artiste here. You have something on your chest. You feel like that you would like to communicate. You would like to tell a story, and you just hope that the one you have chosen to tell will be of interest to people.
When it comes to Christmas movies, there are no shortage of choices. There's movies about big city women finding small town love, movies about princes from fictional countries also finding love, and all kinds of people finding love around the Christmas tree. But I've got something different for you. Holiday Hold Up, a movie I co-directed and wrote, and it's about a group of restaurant employees who get fired on Christmas Eve and decide to exact revenge on their miserly boss. It's light, it's fun, and don't worry, there is some romance. You can watch Holiday Hold Up for free on Pluto, Tubi, YouTube, and more. Watch it with your friends, your family, and from us here at the Filmographers Podcast, we wish you a wonderful holiday season.
So, the restaurant is closing, effective immediately. But tomorrow, I'm still hosting my holiday poker game, and I'll need staff to work it.
You shouldn't do this to people. Not on Christmas. Have any of you noticed your paychecks being a little late? I saw something weird on Chip's computer. I'm pretty sure I'm like $14 short.
These irregularities, they don't happen by accident. What you need is someone who knows their way around such things. There's gonna be like $60K in that place tomorrow night.
They're gonna be playing poker for a few hours. That gives us plenty of time. Crack open the safe, get that money, and get out.
All right. Let the games begin.
Christmas is coming away.
I should explain.
I had nothing to do with this. Nothing.
One of our favorite things to do here on the Filmographers podcast is provide context for the movies that we cover. Joseph McBride, a film historian Keir, and I are both hit or miss on. He said that movies, contrary to what most people say, don't age. They're products of their time and should be examined and understood in the time in which they were made. I agree, and would even say that grappling with context, historical, cultural, whatever, only makes good movies even better.
And the historical context for a foreign affair is fascinating. World War II had recently ended, with the U.S. enacting the Marshall Plan, an initiative that would provide economic relief to Europe, especially the United Kingdom, France, and Germany. The world had learned that taking punitive measures against the losing contestants of a war did no good. In fact, it's what helped give rise to fascism in post-World War I Europe, so a different approach was needed. Rebuild, reconstruct, and rehabilitate. In addition to the economic relief provided by the Marshall Plan, the U.S. military was occupying post-war Germany, attempting to not only keep the peace, but also to denazify its culture, which is exactly where Wilder enters the picture.
As we discussed in our episode covering The Emperor Waltz and our Patreon exclusive episode Billy Wilder Goes to War, Wilder was sent to Germany by the U.S. military on special assignment. His job? To get the Nazis out of the German film industry and create propaganda films that would more or less shame the German people into reform. Now, it's hard to say that Wilder's time in Germany was much of a success, although it did, of course, provide him with some good stories, like the time a play director asked permission to cast a former Nazi as Christ in a Passion play, and Wilder told him, quote, "Sure, you can do it as long as you use real nails when you hang him on the cross." Fair.
Fair. Classic Wilder. Well, most of Wilder's time on this assignment was wasted due to military bureaucracy. He did help edit together footage taken from Nazi concentration camps. You can find the short documentary titled Death Mills on YouTube, but beware, it's a devastating watch. Absolutely harrowing. Remember, Wilder was a European Jew who'd fled Germany and then Paris in order to escape Hitler. And one of the reasons he took this assignment was that he hoped to find his mother, who he hadn't seen for roughly 10 years. She was remarried and living in Vienna at that time, but he hadn't seen her since because of the war. He would later learn that she had been murdered in a Nazi death camp.
Wilder also had fondness for Germany. He had spent his early 20s there living happily under the Weimar Republic, and those were formative years for him. It's where his writing took off, where his filmmaking career began, and it's where he forged relationships, particularly with other filmmakers, that would last for much of his lifetime. All of this is to say that Wilder had a deep and conflicted relationship with Germany. It provided him with a lot of joy, and the progressive community he found there helped shape him into the artist he would become. But it also took a lot from him. By the time he returned, there was nothing left, just bombed out ruins and death on a scale so large no one could yet even comprehend it. And that juxtaposition between tragedy and comedy, love and hatred, is where the heart of A Foreign Affair and Wilder's career lies.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for Season 2 of the Filmographers Podcast, our deep dive on the legendary writer-director Billy Wilder. We're grateful so many of you have chosen to support us on Patreon, and we're showing our appreciation by releasing ad-free versions of our main episodes, plus monthly episodes that are only available to our paid supporters. Now, last month's was super depressing. But the holidays are coming up, so we're going to lighten the mood with a look at The Shop Around the Corner, a 1940 romantic comedy directed by Billy Wilder's hero, Ernst Lubitsch.
We're also going to look at a film based on The Shop Around the Corner, Nora Ephron's 1998 You've Got Mail, which unbelievably Keir has never seen. It's like we're sending him back in time to do a movie review.
What can I say? I have a Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan-sized blind spot. Whether you're in it for Lubitsch or Ephron or hopefully both, these exclusive episodes are available to paid Patreon supporters at any level. If you've been thinking about upgrading your membership, now's the time. Just visit patreon.com/The Filmographers Podcast to show your support. And think of it as your holiday gift to us, your hardworking filmographers.
Once again, that's patreon.com/The Filmographers Podcast. If you join at the $2 level, we'll send you a sticker. If you join at the $5 level, we'll send you a mug to drink your cocoa out of. Not ready to pay quite yet? Join for free, just so you see what we have to offer.
That's patreon.com/The Filmographers Podcast. Join today for the full Season 2 experience. And thank you for your support.
And a special big thanks to our newest Patreon supporters, Terry, Sharon, and Greg. Welcome to the Filmographers community. A Foreign Affair follows Phoebe Frost, a congresswoman from Iowa who, along with other members of Congress, comes to Germany to ensure that military morale is strong and, most importantly, that the GIs aren't fraternizing with the enemy and catching a case of, quote, moral malaria. I love that. To her horror, and she has a very juvenile view of love and sex, which is something we'll discuss in a bit. To her horror, she learns that GIs are most definitely fraternizing with the enemy, particularly the female enemy. She crosses paths with John Pringle, a soldier who's carrying on an affair with a cabaret singer, Erika von Schlütau, who is not only a German, but also a former Nazi. She even had her hand kissed by Hitler. That's how high up she ranked. That's pretty high. Frost enlists Pringle, who ironically works in the denazification office, to help her find the enlisted man who's carrying on this horrid affair with von Schlütau, not knowing that it's him. What ensues is a classic series of misunderstandings as well as a love triangle between Phoebe, John, and Erika.
The movie stars Jean Arthur as Phoebe Frost, Marlene Dietrich as Erika von Schlütau, John Lund as John Pringle, and Millard Mitchell, who you probably know from Singin' in the Rain, as Colonel Rufus Plummer, who is a lot of fun. Does a lot with that role. Good presence. It was co-written by Billy Wilder, Charles Brackett, and Richard Breen. Note the third wheel here, which is an important detail for later. The movie was directed by Wilder, and the crew features a bunch of Wilder regulars like editor Doane Harrison, costume designer Edith Head, the appropriately named head of Paramount's costume department. Nominative determinism strikes again. Regular listeners will know I'm a big fan. We should probably take a moment to acknowledge Head's work. This should go without saying, but she is an absolute legend, and she's been with Wilder from the start. I mean, yes, she's head of the studio, but she approves everything. She's got a lot of people working for her, but she definitely had a hand in all the costume design. She made Ginger Rogers look like a 12-year-old, sort of, in The Major and the Minor. She helped Barbara Stanwyck radiate sexuality in Double Indemnity. And here, in A Foreign Affair, she helps make Marlene Dietrich look like a glamorous goddess. Not like she needed that much help. But Head's work is unparalleled, as always. And, it's overdue for us to acknowledge her contribution to Wilder's filmography.
Yeah, I'm glad we're taking a second to do it because, as you said, she's a legend, not just working with Wilder, but just her career is absolutely legendary. She is the best. She is a trailblazer in what she did. And man, Keir, those dresses she puts Dietrich in, absolutely stunning. Maybe they pop more because of the grim backdrop they're cast against. Again, more juxtaposition with Wilder. Or maybe it's just Dietrich, but it's hard to imagine a more perfect person in a more perfect dress.
Yeah, and another reason they pop is that, as Wilder acknowledged, Dietrich was the rare star who knew how she should be lighted to her best advantage and would sometimes kibitz on the lighting setup. She had star power and she knew how to make herself shine, literally.
Hi-oh. Now, I'm going to backtrack just a little bit here, Keir.
You mean I should stop Googling pictures of Dietrich before you get uncomfortable?
In those exact words, yes.
Okay.
So I want to talk about juxtaposition in A Foreign Affair. What fascinates me, starting at the very top, is that the movie you described, and what you described in your one-sentence summary, and the movie that this is about a congresswoman visiting war-ravaged Germany in the shadow of Nazism, trying to enforce moral standards and encountering an American soldier carrying on an affair with a former Nazi who's more or less his prostitute and he hers, while also being sexually exploited by him, Keir. The movie I just described is not funny. Yet, A Foreign Affair somehow is. It's a satire. It is a satire at its heart. That is what this movie is. It's also dramatic. It also has some tension, but it has plenty of laughs. It is finding humor in a very unfunny situation, a dark situation, I would even say. And that, to me, is what makes A Foreign Affair the most Wilder movie so far. This is the movie that, to me, created the template for many of his movies to come, including what's arguably his masterpiece, his greatest masterpiece, because he made a few masterpieces, but his best masterpiece, The Apartment.
Yeah, and this, I think, is where you get the word so commonly associated with Wilder, cynicism, cynical. We've discussed how people tend to think Wilder is a deeply cynical filmmaker, and his take, with which we both agree, is that he's simply a realist. Tonally, he was way ahead of his time, and which is what makes A Foreign Affair still powerful, but also what prevented it from finding success in its time. One of the reasons I initially struggled with your premise is that, hey, Double Indemnity and The Lost Weekend are both dark movies, much darker than what was being made at the time. You know, Brackett didn't even want to work on Double Indemnity. It was so dark and so, you know, so much in the gutter.
So they went to the gutter and found Raymond Chandler.
He was looking for a bottle. They both feel like Wilder is starting to let himself off the leash. But to your point, I don't know that I'd call them cynical in the same way that A Foreign Affair is cynical. Like Indemnity is about bad people doing bad things. Phyllis, I think, is inherently amoral or self-interested, and, Walter is lustful and greedy, but there's really not too much of a larger context to their actions. I mean, you could say it's a generalized commentary on the darkness that's the heart of the American suburban dream, but there's nothing in the story itself that adds that layer of cynicism, or maybe we could use the word irony. There's nothing inherently ironic about that construction.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great word. I would agree. That's a great point, that the irony that exists in A Foreign Affair, just looking at it, that surface level, what you see and what you get, creates that level that doesn't exist in Wilder's movies yet. And we haven't gotten there, but we know Wilder enough that is where we're going.
Yeah.
Soon enough. If you want to take that even further, if you look at, The Lost Weekend, it's about a man struggling with a severe and dark illness. It's raw and it's powerful, but this is where we see how A Foreign Affair separates itself from these movies, because again, it's all about juxtaposition. It's about the irony that you find. From a bird's eye view, the story in A Foreign Affair is about a war-ravaged Germany occupied by American soldiers who are supposed to be keeping the peace and rooting out Nazis. Simple. What are they doing instead? Screwing like horny teenagers. There's this great scene where Phoebe and her fellow congressmen are being driven around Berlin, or what's left of it. And as the colonel points out, he's pointing out all these major landmarks that are now just bombed out shells. And, as they drive, Phoebe sees all these GIs, giggling and flirting with German women. And she is like aghast, she can't even barely take it. And it also, it's good for her character, but it also points out and pokes fun at the American puritanical view of sex versus continental Europe's far more progressive approach, which is where Wilder comes from.
And we know where Wilder lies in that continuum.
We know where he's at in the spectrum. Yes. Listen to our Lost Weekend episode to see just how many domestic affairs he was juggling at the time. 3?
Yeah, he was cheating on his wife with his mistress, who he then began cheating on.
Ooh, man, work up a sweat just thinking about it. So as they're driving, going back to the scene culminates when Phoebe sees a German woman pushing a baby stroller with 2 American flags waving from the carriage, and she is like just beside herself. But that's the entire thing about A Foreign Affair. You have this really grim backdrop of post-war ruins. You have Nazis running around still. Some of the, these are some of the worst villains in history. And what are people doing? Laughing and flirting and exchanging goods on the black market. And again, having lots of foreign affairs. This is Wilder's world. There's no real allegiance, to a flag or to marriage, even ask him, or much of really anything at all. I mean, I don't think he's saying people go out of their way to do these, unfaithful things, I guess you can say. But I think he's just saying this is opportunity. Human nature is committed to opportunity presents itself, and you just kind of go with the course of the river where it's taking you. Call it cynical if you want, and as we've said, many people have. But I don't know. I call it an acknowledgement of the truth. It's no surprise, considering all this, that Wilder called A Foreign Affair one of his better pictures in a series of interviews he did with Cameron Crowe. He even admits, and this is something, because Wilder, you have pointed this out a lot, Wilder doesn't talk about any of his movies being personal. So for him to even kind of scratch a little bit at this and say it's one of his most personal films is kind of saying a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, he was intentionally private. And so for him to talk about the aspects of his personality or his past or his experiences that made into his film almost never happened.
No, very rare. And I mean, I think when he was doing these interviews with Crowe, for context, he was at least 90.
He was in the November of his years.
He was. I think Thanksgiving had passed too.
There's another great scene where Pringle is driving through a bombed out Berlin street, going to see Erica, who, let's be honest, as you said, is coded as his prostitute. He's bringing her a gift, a used mattress that he bought on the black market by trading a cake from his sweetheart back home. And the song that is playing, Rodgers and Hart's Isn't It Romantic? Obviously, there's nothing romantic about this, at least not in the conventional sense. It's romantic to Pringle. He's loving this life. He has no desire to return home to Iowa. The thought fills him with horror. He doesn't want to return to his sweetheart and hay rides, none of it. He'd rather roll in the hay on the used mattress that he bought on the black market with his ex-Nazi cabaret singer. And side note about Isn't It Romantic? During a documentary interview with Wilder later in his career, filmmaker, I can't remember if it was Schlondorf or another one. Lots of Germans would come interview Wilder. The interviewer pointed out that he had used Isn't It Romantic several times in his films, and Wilder professed surprise. He said, I did. He said, well, the studio owned it, so I guess we were cheap. But it seems very intentional here. It's obviously intentional. It's an amazing ironic juxtaposition, back to the word irony. To your point, this isn't the Lubitsch touch, it's the Wilder touch. The juxtaposition of how we expect people to behave and how they actually behave. In a movie from this era, we expect the hero who has identified an escaped Nazi to immediately bring them to justice. That's the noble version of what Pringle ought to do, and that's certainly what the Hayes office would have liked him to do. Not stash her away, bring her nylons, and allow her to keep singing at an underground nightclub. The name of that club, by the way, is the Lorelei, which is also the name of a German mythic character who seduced men with her song.
Whoa.
Levels upon levels.
Yeah, wow.
Who is the hero in this movie? Not Pringle. Erica, the Nazi, certainly isn't the hero, although she does perform some selfless and even heroic acts. Is it Phoebe? She's puritanical, that's certain, but she allows herself to be corrupted. She's also part of the America that committed some serious international war crimes in bombing Berlin and other German cities. Sure, you can argue that you can justify the act because it's war, but that's the point. Everyone has their justifications for what they do.
Keir, my favorite place to record the Filmographers podcast is in your studio in the Fine Arts Building, which is a place that you know a lot about.
I guess you could say I wrote the book on the subject. It's called Chicago's Fine Arts Building, Music, Magic, and Murder.
Whoa, murder?
Hey, artists have a lot of sharp objects lying around. And yes, while I do explore some of the darker things that have happened in this historic building, I focus more on its fascinating history and famous tenants, past and present.
I think my favorite story was about the Fine Arts Building's connection to Citizen Kane. I also love, and no offense, Keir, all the pretty pictures.
None taken, Mike. It's a beautiful hardcover book loaded with stunning photographs and archival images that looks great on your coffee table, or the coffee table of any arts lover in your family.
Listeners, you can order signed, personalized copies of Chicago's Fine Arts Building, Music, Magic, and Murder from our favorite bookstore, Exile and Bookville, located in the Fine Arts Building at 410 South Michigan Avenue. Or find them online at exileandbookville.com. Just use the notes field to tell them how Keir should inscribe it.
It's also available from the publisher at trope.com and wherever books are sold.
Wilder knew propaganda didn't work. While the US government and even Hollywood wanted to endlessly shame the German people for their part in World War II, Wilder had seen firsthand how ineffective that strategy was. Here's a quote from him. Will the Germans come in week after week to play the guilty pupil? They might show up to the theaters, but they'd end up sleeping through the propaganda so they could be bright and ready for Rita Hayworth in CoverGirl. End quote. He's not wrong. Here, Wilder's perspective speaks very profoundly to me. I think message fiction, message quotes in there, so to speak, is most effective when it's not wagging its finger at you, but when it's delivering its message in a shiny package, meaning it's entertaining. George Romero, Jordan Peele, Ray Bradbury, they all crafted powerful fiction that contained important messages, but they never lost sight of the story. Wilder agreed, and he had this to say specifically about the inception of A Foreign Affair. Quote, a love story, cleverly devised to help us sell a few ideological items. Such a film would provide us a superior piece of propaganda. They, the audience, would stand in long lines to buy, and once they bought it, it would stick. End quote.
Wilder got the idea for A Foreign Affair during his time in post-war Germany, but it wasn't just the urban devastation and his desire to tell a meaningful story that inspired him. He spent a lot of time with GIs, seeing the way they lived and hearing the way they talked. In the scene where Colonel Plummer is driving the members of Congress around Berlin, some of his lines were lifted, Wilder claimed, from conversations he overheard between soldiers. How Hitler and Braun got married and committed suicide in the same basement, the perfect honeymoon, and how bookies lost big on Hitler's promise that the Third Reich would last 1,000 years. Story and dialogue was all around. What he needed, as always, was a star, and this time he knew exactly who he wanted.
Before Wilder returned to America after a stint with the Army, he stopped in Paris, specifically so he could visit one person, Marlene Dietrich.
Not just a huge star of stage and screen, Dietrich was also prominent politically and fiercely anti-Nazi. During World War II, she housed German and French exiles and helped them become citizens. She even did this before World War II. In fact, she and Wilder established a fund that helped Jews escape Germany during the 1930s. When the war began, Dietrich really got to work. She recorded music for the troops, helped sell war bonds, and did 2 extended USO tours entertaining troops in Algeria, Italy, France, and the Netherlands. For her efforts and for her bravery, she was awarded the Medal of Freedom, which she called her life's greatest achievement. According to Wilder, quote, she spent more time on the front lines than Eisenhower.
That's such a great line. So when Wilder went to visit her in Paris, he did so under the guise of seeking her advice on who should play the lead in his upcoming film,
Crafty, that one.
Very clever, because it was all a game, Keir. Wilder was just messing her. He knew exactly who he wanted. But Dietrich wasn't interested in playing someone who'd slept with a Nazi, and Wilder expected that. Remember, this isn't Wilder's first rodeo when it comes to casting stars in unappealing roles. Barbara Stanwyck was reluctant, to say the least, to play a murderous femme fatale, but Wilder asked her, "Are you an actress or a mouse?" And as history tells us, that actually worked. Easy as that. Similarly, Wilder told Dietrich, "You are an actress. I want you to play the part, not join the Nazi party."
I mean, good point. Fred McMurray didn't want to play Walter Neff either. Wilder really has this history of taking these challenging, morally ambiguous or outright non-ambiguous, just dark roles and talking people into playing them, which I think they rarely would regret later. I don't think Marlene Dietrich regretted this choice.
Yeah, it's funny because now it's like when you're a fluffy actor or actress, performer, whatever, and you want to be taken seriously, you have to go dark.
Yeah, right.
You know?
It's almost like the playbook. Like, well, nobody takes me seriously. I want to win an award. I'm going to lose weight, look ugly, and, crawl around in filth.
That's the Machinist.
I was thinking of Christian Bale. Yes.
Which, by the way, I mean, Christian Bale just does that for fun.
Yeah. It's recreation for him. And I love Christian Bale. He's great. But
Me too.
He's also easy to make fun of because he's so committed.
Very committed. He is, yes. Which, why it makes it so easy to love.
Now, on the subject of casting, there's some really interesting stuff going on, particularly in how it relates to Wilder and Brackett's relationship. But before we get to that, let's discuss Jean Arthur.
Let's. Yes.
She was a very unlikely Wilder cast member. It had been 4 years, in fact, since she'd been in a movie, The Impatient Year, which was released in 1944. And remember, given the rate at which actors cranked out movies during this era of Hollywood, 4 years is practically a lifetime. It's like, 15 years in modern.
Yeah, she was Terrence Malick. There's the Terrence Malick of 1940s Hollywood. Well, and she, unlike Malick, she actually retired. Like Malick, I don't know the exact story. I don't think he ever announced anything.
Yeah.
I think he just kind of vanished and then came back with Thin Red Line was his like comeback.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But she was actually retired. She was like, I'm done. I'm going. I'm announcing a thing. I'm not doing this anymore. So she was officially out of Hollywood when Wilder came calling for a foreign affair. Her contract with Columbia had expired in 1944. So she was officially, no strings, done. She's gone. And in particular, she was very much done. She was very done with Harry Cohen, head of Columbia. He said that Arthur, Jesus Christ, quote, had the face of an angel mixed with a horse. Ugh. God. I mean, it's a good line. But it's horrible, a horrible thing to say.
Oh man.
Awful. And in case it couldn't get worse, don't worry, it can. Because he had also spied on her and other actresses in the Columbia stable through, I never knew this. I guess I shouldn't be surprised because the era and awful everything. But he had a secret doorway, a secret doorway in the women's dressing room that he used to sneak in and spy on women at the very least. Who knows what?
Who does that remind us of? He who shall not be named on this podcast.
Get comfortable. But, in turn, Arthur admitted to often fantasizing about murdering him. And you know what? Who can blame her?
She should have been in Double Indemnity.
Yeah. God, put some of that rage into that. She would have, not that Barbara Stanwyck didn't do great, but she would have been up to the task to channel some of that right into the role. So now, even though her contract expired, she's still an A-list performer, and she was still receiving lots of offers, but she rejected them all until a foreign affair. Now, Keir, she's out of the picture for a while. She's moved on. She comes back for a foreign affair. Was Arthur glad that she chose to come out of retirement to work with Billy Wilder?
Not particularly. Now, I need to qualify that answer. Most people probably only know that Jean Arthur starred in a lot of movies for Frank Capra and that she up and disappeared from Hollywood, as you said. But there's a reason for that. What most people don't know, and what I certainly didn't know before we started researching A Foreign Affair, is that Arthur struggled with crippling anxiety. Frank Capra said she used to vomit between each scene and then go on to deliver a flawless take. Well, that's probably hyperbole. It's true that Arthur would spend a fair amount of her time on set feeling very uncomfortable at best, and at worst, losing her lunch. Arthur was, at the time Wilder offered her the role, taking college courses at a women's school in Missouri. And with only 2 weeks remaining before her final exam, she left school and returned to Hollywood for a fee of $175,000, one of the biggest paydays of her career.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to look at this because what we know of Arthur and, anxiety, performance anxiety in particular, is a very serious thing. But what's really interesting is that she is such an odd couple with Wilder. And Wilder, as we learn, I mean, we're going to discover as we go on, like he's like the anti-Hitchcock, where Hitchcock is uncomfortably, obsessing over blondes. Wilder can't get along with them.
But who made them more miserable? Hitchcock might win that.
Oh, yeah. The lasting damage he did to Kim Novak is bad, really bad. We mentioned in our last episode, the What Went Wrong podcast.
Yeah.
One of the greatest episodes they have. What is it called? It's the movie about the lions. Wait, is it Kim Novak or is it
Tippi Hedren?
It's Tippi. Yeah, it's Tippi Hedren. Sorry, he messed up. He messed up a lot. It's hard to keep them all straight because he messed up so many women.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tippi Hedren. Roar.
Hedren. Roar. Yes.
Roar. Listen to that episode. You want to talk about how badly Hitchcock messed up. Everything that happened in Roar with Tippi Hedren was awful, but the first link in that chain is Alfred Hitchcock.
She had quite a time of it.
Yes, bad. But Arthur's time, now getting back to her, not a happy time making A Foreign Affair, not as bad as Tippi Hedren. So I guess that counts for something. She accused Wilder of favoring Dietrich. In the book Nobody's Perfect, Wilder recalls a story where one night, just past midnight, his doorbell rang. Jean Arthur was standing there, trembling with anger, I guess you could say, and she accused Wilder of burning her close-ups. In fact, she accused Dietrich of telling Wilder to burn her close-ups because she didn't want Arthur to look better on screen.
According to Ed Sykoff in his book On Sunset Boulevard, Wilder told star John Lund, quote, "What a picture. I've got one dame who's afraid to look in a mirror and one who won't stop." I wish I could do Wilder's Austrian accent, but anyway, you can hear his cherubic little German voice there.
Yeah, you can.
Speaking of Lund, we should point out that Wilder loved Lund. He told Cameron Crowe that Lund was every bit as good as Jack Lemmon or Walter Matthau, two actors Wilder would collaborate with plenty down the road. But Wilder admits Lund didn't connect with audiences, at least not as a leading man. But Wilder must have liked him because he let him improvise lines on set, which is something he didn't allow anyone to do, really.
Yeah, he had the line, what is the line, Keir, maybe you can remember, the Mother's Day, it's like, slow down, baby, it's Mother's Day or something.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
It's a very weird line.
Yeah, but it works. It's kind of funny.
It's almost like a non sequitur, but yeah.
Yeah, that was all Lund, believe it or not. So now, it is true that Wilder loved Dietrich. On many occasions, he has said that of all the actresses he's worked with, there's none that he admires more. And she did live with him during the filming of A Foreign Affair. So if you're Arthur, it's not difficult to make the leap to some favoritism happening. But watching the actual movie, it's evident that Arthur's suspicions don't seem well-founded. She has plenty of close-ups throughout the movie, and she looks fantastic. She looks great in this movie. And maybe she agreed because many years later, when she finally saw the film, I think this is like 40 years later or something like that, or 30, long time, she called Wilder and told him how much she enjoyed it. Shortly after she passed away, Wilder later said, and I quote, that she died because she had been nice to me.
I see you do not believe in lipstick. And what a curious way to do your hair, or rather not to do it.
Now, wait a minute. You know who you're talking to?
An American woman. And I'm a little disappointed, to tell you the truth. We apparently have a false idea about the chic American woman. Oh, I suppose that's publicity from Hollywood.
So we have our two leads, Dietrich and Arthur. And we have our two lead roles, a continental, sexually liberated, free-spirited, independent lounge singer, and a sexually prudish, conservative, uptight Republican congresswoman. Keir, do these two remind you of anyone?
Well, I would say that these two characters sound a lot like the real-world people who created them, Billy Wilder and Charles Brackett.
You would be correct. Keir, tell me a little bit about what Brackett's and Wilder's relationship is like at the time of writing A Foreign Affair.
Well, we wouldn't be discussing it if things were going smoothly.
Here's your answer. Great.
But can we actually pinpoint a time when things did go smoothly? I mean, I think the first year they worked together was maybe a little bit of a honeymoon period, but it didn't last long. Their partnership was defined by two things. One, the amazing movies they made together, and two, how often they fought while making those movies. It's important to note that deep down there was a lot of mutual respect because we've read Brackett's diaries. We, frustratingly, have more access to his thoughts than Wilder's. And while he complains about Wilder more often than not, there are also genuinely touching moments where he notes and appreciates Wilder's genius before disparaging Wilder for acting like he knows he's a genius. It's complicated. Externally, they argued frequently and violently. In their office on the Paramount lot, they yelled, they threw things, and once Brackett snapped in half a little flute Wilder had been playing that apparently annoyed him to no end. Brackett vowed repeatedly to stop working with Wilder more times than I can count. They broke up and made up more often than a couple of teenagers. But by the time of A Foreign Affair, their relationship was finally taking a more severe turn.
Earlier in this episode, we noted that A Foreign Affair had a third writer, Richard L. Breen, and this is why. By 1947, Wilder and Brackett were breaking up. It's arguable that they've been breaking up since they got together, but like Keir said, now it's getting real. And Brackett knew it. In his diaries, he chronicles the slow motion dissolution of their partnership, starting in January of 1947. A passage from January 23rd reads, he, Wilder, mentioned some young writer he heard did magnificent things for radio, this writer being Breen, said young writer happens just to have been signed for Paramount. I suspect one of Billy's elaborate brush-offs, but I also was longing to brush him off, so can hardly resent it. I will never write with him again, quote. And then on January 29th, he writes, quote, drove to the studio filled with sadness of passing things. Dick Breen arrived about 11 o'clock and Billy began briefing him as a screenwriter. The collaboration was over. I saw it end with some regret. So basically, Wilder is grooming Brackett's replacement, Breen, right in front of Brackett. Even though ultimately Wilder ended up not really liking Breen's work and they never collaborated again, Brackett still, in this time, saw the writing on the wall pretty clearly as this is happening. And it's kind of sad.
Yeah, it's very touching.
Yeah, I mean, we have recommended it before, but his diaries, it's the pictures that got small. And Keir has extolled this so many times, like a look into Hollywood, or look into his relationship, and look into writing at the time. It's really magnificent. It's really great. But getting back to A Foreign Affair, now, because Breen, it seems like from what we can tell, his time was kind of short-lived. He does get a credit, so he contributed enough, so to get a credit because you have to, but it seems like he was pushed out of the way and Brackett was back in the driver's seat for Foreign Affair. But again, he knows what's coming.
Brackett and Wilder had brought other writers in to help out before, most notably Jacques Thierry, who had done polishes on The Emperor Waltz, and Robert Harari, who had actually assisted with the construction of A Foreign Affair when its title was Operation Candy Bar, but not enough to get story credit, of course. But those other writers were uncredited and clearly subordinate to both Brackett and Wilder. This was different, and Brackett knew it. Their feuding continued throughout A Foreign Affair. According to McBride, Brackett and Wilder went to war over how Dietrich's Erica is introduced in the movie. Brackett was adamant that you could not show Marlene Dietrich with mussy hair brushing her teeth. It was unacceptable to him, especially when you consider his conservative sensibilities. But there was more going on there.
Yeah, it's also the tone of the scene itself, which is so complex and dark, much like the entirety of the film. The scene paints Johnny as a man in love with Erica, not despite her being a Nazi, but because of it. He lusts after her, but he also hates her because of it. Throughout the entire scene, he can't seem to decide whether to kiss her or choke her to death. And he does, playfully, and I'll throw some quotes around that, playfully choke her. Again, more juxtaposition. I've watched it a few times. It's a very odd scene.
Yeah.
It's very strange, and it's disturbing as well, because you feel that from Lund. And I think he does a good job in this scene like that. He does love and hate her in equal measure, and he doesn't know what to do about probably his own feelings too. Yeah. But it's all Wilder. The man who said, this is a quote, "Every man in love is a pervert at heart." A sentiment that Brackett surely would have never shared, but Wilder pushed to have the scene his way, and he got it his way. After, again, according to McBride, Brackett called Wilder sick and threw a phone book at his head and then stormed out of their office.
They really should have removed that phone book from their office.
Probably would have saved their relationship.
As you alluded to a moment ago, and I've said this before, but Brackett's diary, edited by Anthony Slide and collected in the book, It's the Pictures That Got Small, is absolutely fascinating. Not only does it chronicle Brackett's relationship with Wilder, but it's a richly compelling chronicle of Hollywood during this time. Brackett was involved in so many projects. He was on the WGA board, the Writers Guild of America, for those who don't know, and through his involvement with the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, helped plan the Oscar ceremonies. In fact, he may have been the first person regarding the Academy Awards to plead, and I quote, "For God's sake, let's cut down the length."
So basically the Oscars have been trying to reduce its runtime for 80 years.
There's no containing those egos, Mike. It's just not happening.
And I'm wrapping up. Please, I'm wrapping up. I will wrap up. Please turn the music off. I've done this before. Thank you.
Getting back to Brackett, he was also just a fascinating guy who was involved in many interesting projects. At the time they were writing A Foreign Affair, in fact, he was trying to adapt A Portrait of a Lady for Olivia de Havilland. He tried to help turn Ball of Fire, the movie he and Wilder had written for Howard Hawks, into a stage play starring Danny Kaye. And he even performed uncredited rewrites on The Bishop's Wife.
Yeah, and Wilder helped with that. So technically, and he's always said that he wanted to work with Cary Grant. So adjacently, technically, he did work with Cary Grant.
1 degree of separation, they worked together.
Closer than me.
Now, we never get a clear sense of why Wilder wanted to break up with Brackett. These are Brackett's diaries, after all, not Wilder's, so we don't get the same insights into his mind. Obviously, they had their creative and personal differences. They were the textbook odd couple, and so their pairing might have been coming to its natural end. Or maybe Wilder was just out for himself. In December 1948, while they were working on Sunset Boulevard, Brackett would record this exchange. Quote, "Finally, in talking about new deals, I said, 'Billy, one thing has shocked me and hurt me immeasurably, that after 15 years of close and dear partnership, you never once said, what will be the best for us? Only, what will be best for me?' I believe it struck him as a bolt from the blue." I don't want to excuse Wilder, because sometimes he was obviously a self-centered jerk. But he also had grown up poor and in an environment completely lacking in security. Brackett came from class and comfort, and to Wilder, the world probably was every man for himself. And, one way to look at it might be that Brackett could afford the luxury of loyalty. One thing we do know, according to Brackett, is this. Wilder wanted to become a producer, a role currently occupied by Brackett. And movies from that era, unlike now, didn't employ an army of producers. They just had one, which meant that if Wilder was going to assume that role, there would be no room for Brackett. On June 24th, while they were working on A Foreign Affair, Brackett wrote, "Billy spoke about his desire to be a producer, a straight producer, something I should think as remote from his personalized talent as it was from Ernst Lubitsch's."
Did we mention Brackett could also be very, very catty in his diaries? There's some like real serious, the real filmmakers of old Hollywood in there. And I really love it, especially his snide remarks about some of the most beautiful and famous stars of the day, like meow. Like there is some he talks about women's dresses. We were talking about this before a lot. And he'll talk about it, not in a flattering way often, what was she wearing kind of remarks.
Men and women, nobody's safe. He is so scathing on people's looks, personalities, clothing, everything. I have literally written meow in the margins of my book.
Well, I think he has these standards because he comes from a family that surely hosted, she's affluent, influential family that probably hosted a lot of social events. So in his mind, I'm sure standards were like proper and set. And these were the expectations.
East Coast, and the West Coast is very different.
Yes. Yeah. East Coast, West Coast rears its head again. All this is to say that Brackett's diaries are not only of interest to Wilderologists, they're anybody who wants the ultimate insider's view of the golden age of Hollywood. You will enjoy it. The full title is, again, it's The Pictures That Got Small, Charles Brackett on Billy Wilder and Hollywood's Golden Age. And it's edited by Anthony Slide. And, a great place to order it from? Our favorite bookstore right here in the Fine Arts Building, Exile in Bookville.
That's where I got my copy. Now, despite the two writers fighting and a third one being groomed, a script did get written, so one hurdle was eventually cleared, but another was about to be placed in their way. This hurdle, though, had nothing to do with clashing personalities. This one came from Wilder's good friends at the Production Code Administration, backed, this time, by the U.S. Army. And if that wasn't enough, Wilder and Brackett had to cope with the sudden death of a dear friend.
Lubitsch touch, yes. Well, that's if I could explain it, this is if I knew the formula, I would patent it.
In 1948, there were no war movies quite like A Foreign Affair. There were certainly satires like The Great Dictator in 1940, and in 1942, Wilder and Brackett's mentor Ernst Lubitsch made an all-time classic with To Be or Not to Be. And in 1945, there was The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp from Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger, the latter also a friend of Wilder's. And there was also a subset of films made in Europe that were using the rubble of bombed Europe as a background, but these things were not really widely released in Hollywood. They weren't really making it to Hollywood. So we're kind of focusing on the things that were more widely known or in broad release, I guess we'll say. So none of the movies we mentioned, Great Dictator, To Be or Not to Be, etc., none of those are dark in the way A Foreign Affair is dark. And none of them come even close to showing sympathy to a Nazi the way Wilder seems to be sympathetic to Dietrich's character.
Sure seems to be. And it's no wonder then that the PCA came down hard once again on Billy Wilder. According to Sykoff, the PCA objected to the U.S. government, Army, and members of Congress being the subject of ridicule. And the PCA especially objected to Jean Arthur's Phoebe Frost, not because she's a myopic prude, but because she lets her hair down and gets drunk at a nightclub, behavior very unbecoming of a congresswoman. If they only knew what was in store. The PCA objected to the sex. They objected to Johnny bringing Erica a mattress. They objected to the very soul of the movie. But Wilder proceeded anyway. He made some cosmetic changes in the dialogue, and apparently the original opening scene was even edgier. Brackett, in the diary, writes something like, "At least we kept the mattress." But that was about it. The PCA wasn't happy with him, though, when were they? And neither was the Army.
No, they were not. In fact, the original idea was that A Foreign Affair would be shown to troops who were still overseas to boost their spirits and remind them of the value of their efforts. But A Foreign Affair wasn't exactly the rah-rah nationalistic story the Army wanted. Moral malaria, remember? And instead of using it as propaganda, something Wilder was opposed to anyway, the Army banned the film and refused to let it be shown to troops, whether domestically or abroad. Wilder was even denounced on the floor of Congress for, according to Sykov, quote, treating Germans and Americans with equal irreverence, end quote, which is actually pretty accurate, right? He treats everybody irreverently. And in an ironic twist, the movie was banned in, of all places, Germany.
Here, as we've chronicled, Wilder is nothing if not stubborn. But you have to wonder if maybe he's pushing things a little too far with this one. An argument can be made about his state of mind, even his emotional state, because on November 29th, just a month before A Foreign Affair was scheduled to start shooting, Wilder's dear friend and mentor, Ernst Lubitsch, just 59 years old, died of a heart attack. Here, maybe I'm reaching, maybe I'm not, so I'll ask you, do you think Lubitsch's death had any impact on A Foreign Affair?
I mean, I'm guessing it did. You know, although plans for the film were pretty much in place by the time Lubitsch died, as we know, films are shaped while they're shot, and even more in post-production. Brackett describes Wilder as looking heartbroken after Lubitsch's death, and while some people's sharp edges might be dulled with grief, I can imagine having the opposite effect with Wilder, making him darker, angrier, and more uncompromising. It's interesting that Wilder's idol would be Lubitsch, though, you know, whose films were so gentle and had so light a touch. Lubitsch's Shop Around the Corner, which we'll be discussing later this month in an exclusive episode for Patreon supporters, was filmed in 1939 as the Nazis put Germany in a stranglehold and came out in 1940, the year Hungary became the fourth country to join the Axis powers. And yet, it's a nostalgic look at pre-war Budapest. Lubitsch was always considered among the most urbane and elegant directors. Wilder, well, he was the angry young man.
Yeah, I think you put the nail on the head with that. And I can't agree more because, like, I think, you know, Wilder's instincts were pretty much set by the time of Foreign Affair. And we just see, we're watching the evolution, and not like a steer into a different direction.
Yeah.
Maybe it did. I think you used the word best, uncompromising, especially with the PCA stuff. Maybe he was, dug his heels in a little bit more. He's grieving. I mean, Lubitsch was a father figure to him.
Yeah.
So there's some stuff going on, but I don't think it really would change. The death had changed the tone of A Foreign Affair. I think that's what the movie was supposed to be. And regardless of Lubitsch, tragically dying so young, that's what the movie was, because that's who Wilder was.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, it might have, shaded it a little more darkly, or it, been a little bit of a, what do they say, force multiplier.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the movie was what it was, but it's hard to imagine Wilder's mindset not being affected by the death of Lubitsch.
Yeah, no, I agree. Although it is obviously dark and tragic, I do have one pretty hilarious story regarding Lubitsch's death. It's Billy Wilder. How can there not be a story?
Yeah, Wilder could put the fun in funeral.
Sure can. Well, he's gonna. So apparently, Wilder arrived at Lubitsch's house shortly after he died and found a woman he didn't know, a young woman, crying in the living room. He tried to console her, or at least, mollify her. Lubitsch was, a father to Wilder after all, and if he wasn't crying, then she shouldn't be either. To which this young woman replied, quote, "Easy for you to say, he didn't fuck you, then stiff you for the money." Like Wilder, Lubitsch also had a thing for prostitutes. According to legend, Wilder gave her $50 and said, "Here, now you can stop crying." When asked about the story later, Wilder said it was absolutely untrue because, quote, it was the chauffeur who paid her off.
God.
And that's why there's Billy Wilder and there's everyone else.
But you are a serious director. I mean, You're very kind, Michel, but just between the two of us, I don't think that making movies is my entire life. Now, if there's one thing, that I hate more than not being taken seriously is to be taken too seriously.
All right, so Keir, the moment has come. Tell me, what did you think of A Foreign Affair? Did you enjoy it?
Mike, I watched it 2 times and I had very different reactions each time. It's funny how different our feelings can be about things depending on, it could be the day of the week or our mood or even who we're watching them with. It's a great reminder to take your time in forming an opinion, maybe rewatch, and never rush to snap judgments. On my first watch, I made a note that I admired it more than I enjoyed it. I definitely admired it for all the reasons you pointed out. Its layers, its bravery, its unflinching look at human nature. But I didn't love the performances. Dietrich absolutely has star quality, but the cabaret scenes struck me as kind of, stagey and stiff and reminded me of her origins as a stage and silent star from the 20s, Every time she takes the stage, she has this like motion, like she's always symmetrical. She raises both palms to the sky and she's a little stiff, it just felt a little dated in the 40s. It seemed like a little bit of a relic. Although I did love how she was game to be introduced, brushing her teeth. That showed courage, I think, for somebody who's definitely a glamorous star.
Yeah. It's brave. It's remarkable. Like her and Jean Arthur, and maybe this plays into a little bit of Jean Arthur's insecurities. They were in their mid 40s during this movie, which that's, ancient Hollywood now. Sadly, the ageism and sexism, colliding is a pretty powerful and terrible thing. But then, gosh, that had to have been very tough to overcome to be that age and an actress. That's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe gets to the root of some of the insecurities, that you were discussing. Still on the acting, I also I felt like I didn't share Wilder's love of John Lund, who on first viewing struck me as kind of just adequate. And Jean Arthur, I know she's supposed to play a prude, and maybe this is me viewing it through the lens of 2025, which is not 1948, which is not fair, but she just came across as very two-dimensional. And this is more of an emotional response than a critical one. But, I just kind of found her character dim-witted and annoying, which made the love triangle to me seem just totally lopsided. It was like a stool that one leg is much shorter than the other. So one interesting thing that I reflected on later, though, is that I was watching with my wife, Mariah, who was just disgusted at how dim-witted Frost is portrayed, and like certainly the closing gag that Captain Pringle is trapped by her does feel broad and sexist, even for the time. And so I think my viewing experience, she's probably more enlightened about this than me, but my viewing experience was certainly affected by kind of feeling the frostiness, no pun intended.
I think the pun is intended.
Okay, fine. I intended it. Pun fully intended.
Well, it started with Wilder by naming her Frost.
Right. A little bit obvious, like the Ice Queen is named Frost. Yes. But anyway, feeling the frostiness coming from across the room as my wife was kind of sniffing at this film, and like totally fairly, right? A lot of people feel like Wilder was a misogynist, and I think he did have some degree of misogyny. I think it's somewhat overrated because I think he's treats men sort of badly as well, like in his art. I'm not talking about his personal life. And it's worth noting that in A Foreign Affair, like Ninochka, a strong and capable woman is played as someone who definitely needs to be taken down a peg by falling for a man, right? It's like, it's a theme. It's a recurring thing. But then again, this was the 1940s, and we should always try to consider a film in the context of its time, as we're talking about with McBride, and as we generally try to do. We really try to consider the context. So, maybe I made my peace with that in the intervening week before my rewatch, because the second time I watched it, and this time I watched it with my son Cosmo. So I was watching with a dude,
but he's young, so he's like more ready for this sort of stuff. Right. He's like, whoa, hey, what's going on with this?
You would think, because, definitely my kids are super progressive, but I think he enjoyed the film.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he enjoyed it. And I certainly found that it worked a lot better for me the second time around. I thought the humor played better. I liked all of the actors better. I felt more forgiving of Lund and Arthur. I still didn't find it as compelling as the movies that surround it in Wilder's filmography, like Double Indemnity and Sunset Boulevard and Ace in the Hole, which we'll be coming to. To me, those are all-time greats. And whatever its strengths, A Foreign Affair isn't quite at that level. You could argue that's partly because Brackett had less influence, but then again, he was hardly involved with Double Indemnity, and he wasn't involved at all in Ace in the Hole. So, I did like Jean Arthur better the second time around, but maybe it comes back to the casting. I think maybe what would have elevated this movie, because again, thematically and, I think the writing is strong. Conceptually, it's amazing. I'm very attracted to the darkness at it. It's very much, a worthy predecessor to the Good German, Soderbergh's film that we love. So maybe the thing that would have elevated it from a strong B to an A for me would have been a different cast. Like I'm imagining somebody with a nasty edge like Kirk Douglas as Pringle, and as Frost, maybe somebody who could give von Schluto as good as she got, like Katharine Hepburn, who could play. She had range, but she was just so smart seeming. Like she wouldn't have seemed quite as hapless. She could have been kind of, her transition as she realized she had been played, I think would have had a lot more heft, earned a lot more sympathy from viewers. I don't know. I think that movie would have sizzled, but that's all what ifs. You can't argue something that didn't happen. I apologize to you and our listeners for that overly complicated response.
No, that was great.
You just heard me work through my feelings about A Foreign Affair. I guess, where I come down is like, I find it fascinating. I think it's just as a viewing experience, I think it's very good, but not truly great. Mike, what did you think?
Well, this movie, like you, has made me think a lot, and I really appreciate your nuanced take, because we've talked about this leading up to the show. Like I don't say struggled with, wrestled with A Foreign Affair, and I did too, because I had on first viewing, like you, I didn't love it. I hadn't seen this movie before, which is rare. This is one of the few Wilders I'd never seen, and I was like, I enjoyed it well enough. I didn't love Lund. I especially didn't like Jean Arthur, who I think is great in the right place, in the right role. But I feel like she didn't have the complexity for what was being asked of her.
Yeah.
And I don't know if she still did.
Yeah.
But I guess the thing that I struggle with, let me say this. I do like it a lot. And I'm still kind of trying to figure out where I rest on it, because there is a, gulf. There's a separation between like really loving a movie, appreciating it, and enjoying it.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that I struggle with, and we'll talk about this, way down the road, well, not too far down the road, our best of 2025 episode, because it's not a spoiler or anything, but like Paul Thomas Anderson movies, I have come to appreciate, not love. And it's funny because I used to love Paul Thomas Anderson movies. I love Magnolia and Boogie Nights are a 1-2 punch for the ages, I think.
Yeah.
And those are movies that I love and appreciate. But there's a point in his career where I stopped loving his movies, and I watch them and I appreciate them. But that's where it stops. I did not love One Battle After Another. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And, the timing for its release couldn't be more perfect, which, may or may not have much to do with, PTA specifically. I mean, I don't think he knew ICE agents were coming, and all these, all the stuff that we're seeing in urban areas. But I didn't find myself, as I reflected on it, and I had the same experience with California Pizza, or California Pizza.
Licorice Pizza. California Pizza Kitchen.
I don't know if you guys knew this. He started the California Pizza Kitchen chain, which good for him. They seem to be doing great.
Yeah.
Licorice Pizza. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's not a movie I want to watch a ton. If someone came down and said, Mike, you can never watch Licorice Pizza again, I'd say, okay.
That's really well said. And I don't want to digress into PTA too much here. And even saying PTA makes me feel like such a film bro. But but it's just well said. And that's a worthwhile distinction to make. And that's often how I feel as, somebody who's trying to kind of study film. There are movies you appreciate and there are movies you enjoy. I feel the absolute same way about Licorice Pizza and One Battle. And we'll talk about that more in our end of the year episode for sure. I know a lot of people who just absolutely adore that movie and think it's a masterpiece, and great, more power to them. I feel a little disconnected from it. But this, to me, A Foreign Affair absolutely falls into that. Like, I did enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if I had to pick, I would say I appreciate it more than I enjoy it.
Yeah. Like I just watched recently Caught Stealing, the Darren Aronofsky film,
Oh, yeah.
which I love Darren Aronofsky.
Yeah.
I love Darren Aronofsky from Pi on. And I don't know that I don't think he would even say it's like a masterpiece of a movie. I don't think he was not trying to make a masterpiece, but I think he was trying to make a fun crime flick, a New York crime flick. And he did it. And I think it's great, so I don't appreciate it the way I'm like, wow, he's really going for something big here.
Yeah.
But I still enjoyed the hell out of it. Like I really, really liked it. I thought it was a great, fun 90-minute crime flick. Great, So there's a level of enjoyment that I don't have for Foreign Affair. Like I don't have that. Like I really enjoy. Like I second time around, I'm like, oh, I get it, and I really love what Wilder's doing here. And the more, and then our brains get like kind of like influenced by like we're reading all this stuff. We're going to these texts and we're seeing more of the context, and generally that makes the movie better. Like wow, there's so much going on. Like we're so fascinating. So I think there's part of that as well. So that heightened the appreciation, but I don't think it would heighten the enjoyment. It's not a movie that I would go back to the way I would go back to other Wilder movies. I wouldn't avoid it, like California Pizza. But I don't think I'd be quick to revisit it just because of the enjoyment level.
Yeah. Weirdly, I would sooner put The Major and the Minor back on, honestly.
Yeah, I probably would too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. If Five Graves to Cairo, I certainly put on. I enjoy Five Graves to Cairo. Like I actually I think that's a fun, great little, one setting war picture that's kind of unique. The way like what's the Bogart movie where they're fighting for the sand dune Sahara, I believe it's called. It reminds me of that.
I think it's called Sahara.
Yeah. Well, another movie I love, just a small, reduced war picture that I really love. I enjoy it. Foreign Affair, I don't think I enjoy that as much as those.
Well, before too long, we'll be starting to compile our personal rankings of Wilder films. Maybe as with Soderbergh, we'll do kind of a halfway ranking, and we'll see where these things wind up.
I'm surprised to hear you suggesting ranking movies, Keir.
I know.
It's a
what
new
just
day.
Came out of my mouth.
Keir's been hitting the Sagani.
Well, we both liked it overall, which isn't surprising. But Mike, did anyone else like it?
You can say they did. Yeah, it was a muted success, I would say. There's a reason why it's one of Wilder's forgotten movies. I think we just described part of why. Sure, he has so many towering giants that it's easy to overlook even, moderate hits. And while Foreign Affair performed well enough, it was also released on the heels of two Wilder behemoths. You have Lost Weekend, which, not only was a box office smash, but also cleaned up at the Academy Awards. It won Best Picture. And then you have Emperor Waltz. We may not love it, but it was still a box office success, and it starred one of the biggest celebrities in the world. So in this context, A Foreign Affair stands out as doing only okay, if only because the expectations, were a lot higher than they've ever been for Wilder. It was made on a budget of $1.5 million. It made just north of $6 million, though some sources say only $5 million. Movies from this age, hard to kind of tell, but either way, it was a hit. Doesn't matter. $5 million, $6 million, it's a hit. It was also, the 13th highest grossing film of 1948, so not bad.
And critics liked it well enough. Bosley Crowther of the New York Times, who definitely had a moralistic streak, said, quote, "Under less clever presentation, this sort of traffic with big stuff in the current events department might be offensive to reason and taste. But as handled by the Monsieurs, how do you, what is,
Monsieur,
Masters?
I don't know.
Monsieurs, Brackett and Wilder as producer and director of this film, and also as its principal writers, it has wit, worldliness, and charm. It also has serious implications via some actual scenes in bombed Berlin of the wretched and terrifying problem of repairing the ravages of war. Indeed, there are moments when the picture becomes downright cynical in tone, but it is always artfully salvaged by a hasty nip-up of the yarn." There's the C word again, cynical. Hasty nip up of the yarn. Quite a way with words.
Yeah, not bad.
As Steve Martin said, some people have a way with words. Other people, no have way. And Edwin Schallert of the LA Times said, quote, "The bitterness of a foreign affair is likely to linger after its laughs have passed."
And believe it or not, for a movie pretty much forgotten, it was nominated for 2 Academy Awards. Charles Lang for Best Black and White Cinematography, and Wilder, Brackett, and Breen were nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. The movie, by the way, was based on a story by David Shaw. So, yes, A Foreign Affair was a moderate success, but personally, I think its prospects were stymied by one central problem. It peeled back some complexities of a war that everyone would, at the time, just rather see as being very straightforward, and they're right. But it's not the war that's complex. It's the post-war period where things start to become morally and politically ambiguous. And Keir, this isn't the first time we've encountered a post-World War II movie made by an auteur, shot in black and white, and could be called deeply cynical.
No, it is not. That movie is one we adore, The Good German, Steven Soderbergh's masterful exploration of post-World War II Europe. It is a pitch-black glimpse into the power struggles that were pervasive in this place in this time, and it also features a doomed romance at its center. There are other similarities too, like a visiting congressman, black market goods, and a Nazi in hiding that authorities are trying to flush out. Mike and I both fell in love with this movie, and you can hear us gush about it twice in season 1. Once in our regular episode, then once again in an audio commentary we recorded for our Patreon supporters. Another great reason to become a paid Patreon supporter today.
A Foreign Affair, it had to have been on Soderbergh's mind when he made The Good German, front and center on his mind. I would kill to be able to sit down with him and discuss how those movies are just spiritually connected.
Mr. Soderbergh, if you're listening, I'm going to look at the camera. Mr. Soderbergh, if you're listening, or if anyone listening can connect us to Soderbergh, it's an interview we dream of. But before we interview Soderbergh, or anyone else for that matter, we have one last thing to do. It's time for the Filmographers Five. Today we're talking war satires, movies that poked fun at the business of killing. And man, there's a lot of good movies to choose from. So many movies. But Mike, start us off with number 5.
Yeah, this is a damn tough category, Keir, but here goes. Our 5th favorite war satire is Three Kings, David O. Russell's quasi-heist film starring George Clooney, Marky Mark, Ice Cube, and weirdly, Spike Jonze. Even in a year stacked with great movies, 1999 is arguably the greatest movie year ever. Three Kings stood out as an urgent and important movie that solidified Russell as a burgeoning auteur, and Clooney, coming off the great Out of Sight from our man Steven Soderbergh, as a bona fide movie star, despite them getting into a fist fight on set. True story, look it up.
Oh, Russell and Clooney, that is not Clooney and Soderbergh.
No, that would have been weird if Soderbergh showed up to fight Clooney. That would be strange.
Pay to see it. Our 4th favorite war satire is MASH, Robert Altman's groundbreaking 1970 smash hit that, like A Foreign Affair, was also banned by the U.S. Army. It won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, and was a cultural landmark. It also inspired the wildly successful TV show that, well, very good in its own right, never quite managed to capture Altman's dark, acerbic wit. In fact, Altman hated the show. Some say MASH is the most important movie made in a decade of important movies, and to be honest, it's hard to argue with them.
Our 3rd favorite war satire is the one and only Team America World Police, because holy shit, how can we leave this movie out? I don't even know where to begin. The movie is unhinged, brilliant, and it eviscerates post 9/11 culture in a way that only Trey Parker and Matt Stone can. It has puppets, musical numbers, and was nearly slapped with an NC-17 rating because, no joke, graphic puppet sex. And yet, the movie's not only hilarious, it's also genius. Parker and Stone, like always, expose the heart of our country's idiocy and drives a stake through it, although, knowing them, the stake is shaped like a dick. There's only one thing to say about this movie.
America, fuck yeah, coming again to save the motherfucking day.
It's hard to top Team America, but we can top it, and we top it with our number 2 favorite war satire, a movie that's every bit as irreverent, Starship Troopers, baby. Paul Verhoeven's 1997 sci-fi classic absolutely eviscerates military culture, and yet, somehow, a lot of people totally misunderstood the satire and read it as a rah-rah endorsement of shootin' and killin'. Read the correct way, Starship Troopers is a wild ride that satirizes fascism, propaganda, and war in general. It's also a whole lot of fun. While it bombed at the box office, it has reached cult status, and there have been, somehow, 4 sequels. Do not watch any of them.
Nope. I did it for you. I watched at least 2. Do not do it. Casper Van Dien comes back for 3.
No!
Still, don't. Stay away. And our number 1 satirical war movie is the mother of them all, one of the greatest movies of all time, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, Stanley Kubrick's 1964 groundbreaking classic that, God, it mocked the president, the Russians, the Cold War, and everything in its line of vision. The script from Kubrick and the great Terry Southern is one of the best ever written, and Peter Sellers gave the performance, or performances, I should say, of a lifetime. It's iconic, it's infinitely quotable, and all these years later, completely relevant. Which is sad, but also the mark of a good satire. The best satire.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. But as the song goes, we'll meet again.
I don't know what you call that. There probably is a term for it, but that is probably the best, movie closing song. There's got to be a outro, something, I don't know.
Right. Yeah. There's got to be some industry term of art that's more than just song over closing credits or whatever. And there's so many movies that try to, get a little extra twist or ironic something by using a song. But that was one of the earlier ones and one of the best.
Yeah. The needle drop, which people say.
Needle drop. That's what it is.
Yeah. People say, that's like, the song in a movie. If you're watching at home, if you're listening at home, needle drop is when you hear a song, not a, piece that was written for.
It's not score.
It's not score. It's an actual song.
Soundtrack.
Those are needle drops. You hear a song in a movie that that's a needle drop. So there you go. We all learned something today. I still don't know what the hell it's called when it's closing a movie, but we didn't learn that. Whatever.
Well, thank you for joining us on our journey through the life and career of the great Billy Wilder. Want to show us some love? Leave us a rating or review on whatever podcasting platform you listen to us on. Have a comment or a suggestion? We want to hear from you. Please email us. Please. People hardly ever email us. Email us at thefilmographerspodcast@gmail.com. We will read, we will write back, we might even read it during an episode.
We'll definitely read it, especially if it's a bad. Those are the best.
Or be nice.
Or be nice too, that'd be good. Thanks as always to our fantastic producer, Kevin Lau, who makes our podcast sound and look as good as it does. Our theme music was composed and played by Gompson, and our logo and merch designed by Cosmo Graff.
Join us next year as Wilder returns home to La La Land. And if you thought he was cynical about war, just wait until you hear what he has to say about the movie industry.